Don't you just sometimes feel like watch manufacturers could do so much better? Quality, features, pricing, customer service. Different brands have different things they could do better, so we as watch enthusiasts got better experiences with those watches that we love so much. So today we're going through my top 10 of things specific companies could do better in the watch world. I'm playing Monday morning quarterback and armchair CEO all at once. I'm looking at what somebody else has done and discussing what I would do if I were in the driver's seat. Things I would change, things I would fix without being constrained by silly things like budgets, plans, investors, and production limitations. These are some things I think need fixing with some of the biggest watch brands out there. Let's dive in. Tudor have great watches. The black bays are massively popular, and if there's a brand that currently deserves to be associated with the concept of zeitgeist, I think Tudor would definitely be a strong contender. Tudor have METAS movements, they have specialty materials with carbon ceramic alingis, they have collabs with pink dial chronos, they know how to keep the hype high. And because they're so popular, they're also slowly but surely driving up their prices. No new feature gets introduced without a little teeny tiny bump, and they are consistently tracking upwards in terms of pricing. And so far, they are becoming more and more a brand that will have a component of luxury pricing and won't be, at least I don't think so, a great value brand in 5 years' time. But they are actually not good enough at one thing, and that's quality control. All the way back to the date wheel on the original GMT that didn't work. Mine didn't work either. Tudor has had some missteps that are unbecoming. I've seen bracelets that don't quite have the perfect fit to the case that you would expect. I know for a fact that the bezel on an Alinghi, a Marine Nationale, and an FXD will have varying degrees of vertical play. Lume pips are often almost aligned, but not quite. There can be uneven finishing on hands. For the most part, those deviations haven't typically been glaring problems, but Tudor is, from a production perspective, definitely a brand that seems to live by the term, it performs within acceptable tolerances. Basically, their bar for when something is good enough is a little bit lenient, which is maybe fine when you're a value brand, but as those prices go up, that margin of tolerance has to go down. At $5,000 or $4,400, that lume pip has to be perfectly aligned. End of story. Rolex. Yes, Rolex. Rolex could, of course, improve customer service. Rolex could improve on availability, but that's not the thing I want from Rolex. I want, and this is very much an enthusiast talking, I want cases that are designed to be able to carry different straps and are built for NATOs. I want a quick release system to their bracelets so that I can switch out that Oyster bracelet for a NATO or a leather strap. This is never going to happen. I think Rolex delivers their watch in the way they believe it should be worn, and they produce the watch accordingly. But I would love for Rolex to offer that small amount of customization. It would be an irrelevant feature to most normal one Rolex buyers who will never take off that Oyster or Jubilee, but it would be a nod to enthusiasts, and I think it would show that Rolex isn't completely oblivious to the millions of fans that are still out there. Those of you that have seen a lot of my videos know that I'm quite critical of the way Omega is run as a business. I love a lot of their watches, but my God, I think they're underperforming considering their size. Case in point, Swatch Group stock is at the lowest point since 2012. The markets do not think they are a well-run business, despite moon swatches and white dial speedies. I could ask them to make better bracelets. The new Aquaterra bracelet is close, but it's still no cigar for me. But no, I want them to fix one thing, and that's their specifications. The 8800 and the 8900 are among the best movements out there, or at least they have been perceived that way for a very long time. They are METAS, they are master coaxial and all that kind of stuff. But they have 55 to 60 hours of power reserve and a movement that demands a plus 13mm case, which is just not good enough anymore. An Aquaterra needs to be maximum 12.5mm, not 13.4. It needs to have 72 hours of power reserve, and it should also be a full 4 Hz movement and not a 3.5 Hz movement. I'd even go so far as to ask for a 72-hour manual wind upgrade to the 3861 movement. 2 years or so ago, Omega released Spire technology, and you know what? We haven't heard of it since. I'm convinced Omega has the skill to improve their specifications. To this day, Breitling still have some of the most bananas dials in the business. The Navi timer can be excused because it's a literal slide ruler built into a watch, and as opposed to a lot of the other models, they actually succeed in making a dial that communicates the information it needs to communicate and stay legible. But then there's the Breitling Endurance, which a friend of mine jokingly once stated must have been built by a classroom full of 8-year-old boys. Just imagine those boys shouting, it needs a compass, and it needs a chronograph, and it needs big numbers, and it needs multiple handed designs, and everything got put into that thing. The Avenger is a watch that reminds me of a guy that used to be seriously buff, but then started running to slim down. And every time he goes to the gym, his body is just ready to bulk up in no time. I like these watches, but it just needs toning down in terms of dial features. And it would be a significantly better watch, and many of their watches would be better watches for it. Audemars Piguet. Tough one. There's a long discussion to be had about whether leaning into pop culture and marketing will remain a successful strategy for AP. It has for the last 20 years, and who am I, some old dude, to pass judgment on what new affluent customers fall for? But it's just so uncompelling to me to have endless variants of the Royal Oak. Audemars Piguet inviting Nico to their channel doesn't bode well for me. I think Nico is massively entertaining, but he's very much a man that speaks to the same customers that AP has spoken to in the last 20 years. It's fast cars and loud noises and hype. I would love AP to do more of things like the Remaster 2. I would love to see them push some limits in terms of edgy designs. I think they can be a less stuffy, less staid alternative to Patek, but they need to provide those niche ideas to show what they really can do. Keep making Royal Oaks by all means, but do some edgy things every year. That would be cool. I did a review of the Monta SkyQuest a while back. It was a watch that I felt was really well put together. It wasn't necessarily cutting edge in terms of design, but it was a rock solid, well-built watch. I would improve one thing though. I think the Ocean King and the SkyQuest both need slimmer fonts on the bezel and slimmer, more refined hands and plots on the dial. The watches come across as a little bit clunky, and those two refinements I think would elevate those watches massively. I swear on someone's grave, I think Swatch Group have forgotten that they own Breguet. This is a dying brand if I ever saw one. They get no media attention, they get no hype, they get no credit, and we all know how many watch innovations stem from Breguet. They should be a powerhouse, and they're not. A colleague of mine wears a Breguet Type XX, and my first question to him was, whatever possessed you to walk into a Breguet boutique? So anyways, generally I say this, a company is what its CEO is. So AP's former CEO was a marketing and sales guy. So he shaped AP into a marketing and sales powerhouse. Jean-Claude Beaver, George Kern, a lot of those heavy hitters at the big brands are strong on marketing and sales. The CEO of Breguet is more of a watchmaker. Normally, I do have a certain level of disdain for pure marketing CEOs because that's usually when you get hit by brash marketing price increases and reissue after reissue that you see from the likes of AP. Breguet's CEO isn't that, and he has been open about not wanting to take Breguet in that direction. He's committed to quality. Super. He's committed to product. Super. I applaud that. The Type XX was his first real launch, and it was a decent, but not stellar launch. I do think Breguet needs just a little bit more pizzazz. Not AP levels of punch, mind you, but I do think there's potential in moving the marketing and aesthetic of Breguet towards the higher end hipster crowd. I think there's untapped potential that their current CEO hasn't succeeded in unlocking. IWC get the they need to drop prices argument. Of course, we would all love lower prices, and no CEO in his right mind and no luxury watchmaker in their right mind is realistically contemplating lowering their prices. It's counter to the idea of moving upmarket, but IWC I think truly could benefit from some strategic drops in price. For context, Tudor sells a Black Bay 41 for $4,400. Their Black Bay Chrono costs, give or take, about $700-800 more. Now, an IWC Pilot Mark 20 costs $6,150. That's expensive, but I'm okay with it. But the Chrono is $8,700. That's $2,600 more. I don't believe that consumers understand the jump. Rolex can explain a jump in price from steel to two-tone because you know gold is expensive. But $2,000 just for a movement, I don't think people in general outside of the watch community understand that. I think if you priced it at $7,500, that thing would fly off the shelves. It's a similar story for the Portuguesa. The base model costs about $7,500. The Chrono costs $8,450, which I think is an okay bump, but then there's a bump to $13,500 for the 42mm. And I know why. It's a way cooler movement. It's got 168 hours of power reserve, but it's a massive price jump. I'm a firm believer that when you're working with the logic of upgrades, you need to make each jump in price seem reasonable. I think that IWC loses a number of clients on that upgrade path because the leaps are too big when the starting point is $6,000 or $7,000. If you lower the price of that 42mm to 12K, I think that price increase becomes more acceptable for the regular customer. The Morgan Stanley report even seems to justify this. The average sale price of a IWC is about $6,500, $7,000 per watch, which is essentially just an IWC Pilot Mark 20. So there's a lot of people that are not taking the leap up to the next more expensive models. They're staying with the entry models, it seems. Richard Mille. So this is a bit of a personal one. I was on vacation in Portugal this summer. I was down in the Algarve coast. It's got great weather, it's got sunshine, and a lot of foreigners. More importantly, it's got a lot of foreigners with fake Richard Milles. Not replicas, not homages, fakes. How do I know they were fakes? Well, first of all, they said Richard Mille on the dial. I was staying at a very nice hotel with my family. It was a reasonably expensive hotel, but it's not more expensive than the most high-end car there was a Mercedes E-Class. There might be an AMG here or there, but no Bentleys, no Rolls Royces, no Ferraris. So like I said to my wife, what are the odds that someone that's buying a limited edition 140-piece RM 1105 at retail for $245,000 is arriving in a Skoda Fabia? That, and his wife has that ever so desirable two-tone Everose Yachtmaster with a quartz movement inside. And that Richard Mille, it didn't have the blue and orange ring around the crown, and the venting on the strap is wrong. That was just one of several watches that I saw. All of them were fake without a shadow of a doubt. And I've said a million times that I don't care about replicas, but Richard Mille and some of those big brands really need to sue someone for making fakes. It's just way too much. The last one isn't a brand, but rather a movement manufacturer, and it's Sellita. Sellita are a special manufacturer because ever since ETA stopped sourcing movements to brands outside of the Swatch Group, Sellita has become kind of the de facto supplier of movements for a majority of entry value Swiss type brands today. The SW200 is found in Formex and Christopher Ward and Oris and a million others. It's a solid workhorse movement that is available in different grades where the best grades are capable of living up to COSC certifications. The SW300 and others are also great movements, but it's time that they, like Omega, upped their offerings. 38, 40, and at the high end, 50-ish hours of power reserve is not bad, but it's unremarkable. Right now, a gap is opening up between brands like Longines and Tudor on the one hand that have access to COSC and METAS compliant movements with 70 hours of power reserve or more. The thing that's going to happen, I think, is that Tudor and Longines and others are going to continue to raise their prices, and their superior movements are going to be part of the argument for those price increases. But down the road, because their movements are that much better, brands like Tudor are going to get complacent. They will do an Omega and slow down innovation on movements because they are ahead of the pack in terms of specs. If Sellita up their base offerings, we will benefit from better movements in those entry models, and they will pressure Tudor and others to keep innovating. And it's not just Sellita. The sub-vendors that provide Rolex-level bracelets to Monta and Formex, and the vendors that deliver meteorite dials to Zelos need to keep pushing their offerings to those value brands because it is, at least in part, what pushes those high-end brands to innovate. If Rolex and all the others had no competition from the segment below, I've got no doubt that it would become stale and boring in terms of product improvement. There you have it. 10 things, big and small, I would love to see changed or improved. What do you agree with? What don't you agree with? And what would you change? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, like, subscribe. Cheers.